Hello, everyone. I'm going to be reading from my forthcoming memoir entitled Long Ago in the 20th Century, and it describes my childhood living on the grounds of a mental hospital in Binghamton, New York. Chapter 1. When I was a child, I lived with my mother and grandmother in a large Victorian apartment on the second floor of the Broadmoor building. Broadmoor was one of the oldest buildings of the Binghamton State Hospital, which in the year we moved there, 1954, housed about 4,000 chronically and acutely ill mental patients. I was 5 when we moved to Broadmoor and 12 when we moved across the street into a small white cottage that had been transported from higher up on the hillside and which had once been the pest house, the place where patients with communicable diseases were kept in isolation. My mother was a doctor and a refugee. In those years, the hospitals were staffed largely by European doctors who came to the United States after the Second World War and found it difficult to enter the mainstream of the American medical profession. The Zajkowskis from Poland lived upstairs, and across the street, the Bylows from the Ukraine, and over on Garden Avenue lived the Weisses from Germany by way of China, and others whose names I don't remember. There were also some Americans, always referred to in that way. Administrators, the Americans, ran the place. My mother was originally from Hungary, but she had traveled to Italy, to Spain, to Paraguay, to Argentina before she landed in the US and eventually in Binghamton. With her, a mother and a daughter. Behind her, a failed marriage. My parents separated when I was 9 months old. A dead child, 2 wars, and an abortive revolution. She wanted some respite from history and reprieve from the vicissitudes of her own life. Given a choice between Central Islip, Long Island, and Binghamton, she chose upstate New York. We arrived in Binghamton in late summer, a time of year ripe with impending change. My father and his second wife had left the United States to live and work in Germany. I was about to start kindergarten, and my mother was starting a new job. My Uncle Tommy, who had a car, drove us from where we had been living in Queens to Binghamton. It was a long trip through the Catskills on Old Route 17, a winding road that made fast travel impossible. By the time we arrived, it was dark. I had been sleeping soundly in the back seat of the car when suddenly the centrifugal force of the car making a wide curving turn pushed me into the right rear door and woke me up. I could feel the wide turn even though I couldn't see anything. The shift of weight in my body suggested that we were no longer traveling forward, that we had made the sort of definitive gesture announcing arrival. Awake though I was and alert to the change, I pretended to sleep. The car came to a stop, and I continued my imitation of sleep. I knew that if I were sleeping, I would be lifted in my uncle's arms, cradled, and then carried wherever we would go next. And so my uncle opened the car door and lifted my soon-to-be 5-year-old squinting self out of the car and set up a set of wide wooden steps into the huge building that was Broadmoor, across a floor covered in black and white hexagonal tiles, up a flight of stairs, through one of two green doors, into a hallway, then into a room where he placed me gently on a bed, where I did, in fact, fall back into a deep sleep, such that I woke up the next morning to weak sunlight and a view of the bars on the windows of one of Broadmoor's two giant wings.